Alright guys, hope you're all staying safe. With two topics out of the way, these we're looking at loot, rewards, progression, mechanics, replayability and more. Today we're going to talk about build diversity as the third and final topic. With title update 10 looming and the second raid, build diversity is really important because we all want to feel just as powerful using a skill focused build as we do using an all red DPS build or an all blue tank build, for example. I suspect the second raid will be very status effect focused, so quick tip, begin to start creating a build with plenty of hazard protection. With that said, if you want to support me with some additional rewards, you can on Patreon, link below to that. And with that said, let's begin. So topic 3, this is what the Reddit feedback post said. This is a huge topic on its own. As explained in the last state of the game, TU10 addressed some of the outliers that were too strong with the goal to open up the floor for more choices beyond the holy trinity or few very specific weapon combos. With the next title update, they also want to give skill-focused players more tools, gear sets, etc. that allow for more dedicated skill-focused builds. Before I begin to give my thoughts on the questions raised, firstly, leave your own feedback in the comments below, but secondly, do skill-focused players need more tools really? Now, I'm not saying the devs shouldn't be looking to introduce new gear, skills, talents and weapons to the game, but I'm a little surprised they are looking predominantly at skill-focused builds for TU10 when I think that DPS and skill-focused builds are probably the most loved, although there are very few skills being used in the current meta, and maybe this is what the devs are looking at. I think the most underutilized build in the game is a tank-focused one, or a support player, for example. Just a thought. First question says, where do you see improvements for build diversity? Okay, so as I've mentioned before, it's very rare that I see a build focusing on all blue attributes, creating a tank build. Now this is mainly because NPCs hit very hard and the overall armor values you can get from a blue tank build is just not nearly enough. Golden Gear and Gila Guard are kind of pointless brand sets right now. 5% armor on Gila is just way underpowered when NPCs can shred you in seconds, and the same applies for Golden Gear, which gives you 1% armor regen for the 2-piece and 5% total armor for the 3-piece. You're going to have to give up 4 pieces of gear to get 10% total armor, and that's basically nothing. Now I think the NPC damage needs to be universally reviewed, and I believe it will be for TU10, but the devs cannot nerf it too much, otherwise DPS builds will simply become even more viable, which will only further reinforce a DPS meta. What the devs could do is vastly increase the total armor percentage on both Gila Guard and Golden Gear. What about 100% total armor on Gila for 1-piece, and maybe 200% total armor on Golden for the 3-piece? You would have to sacrifice 4 slots, so 4 attributes, to get that 300% total armor, which might sound like a lot, but it would make a 2 million armor build, a build that gets shredded at the moment, go up to 8 million. You'd create a way to tank without encouraging other metas as well. Another thought is something I'm not sure about, but probably worth testing. How about we try 2 talents on gear again? I can see people really grasping this more now with Gear 2.0 as opposed to before, allowing for more freedom to make unique builds. My only reservation will be the devs' ability to ensure this is balanced, and that is my only reservation, but I think it could work if they could do a good job. I would say add more mod slots, but mods that are not offensive are pretty useless, so adding more I don't think would do much. Maybe the devs could look at blue and yellow mods as they seem a bit weak. To sum it up, if there's any way the devs could make tank builds and skill builds that are viable using any skill, that's what they need to do. Moving on, and the second question says, what were the reasons you did not try a healer or a more support tank orientated builds? I don't have much experience running as a healer support build because I mainly play solo, so I cannot comment on that really, although what I will say is healer builds appear to be limited. The healer hive has a set number of charges, unlike the support station from the Division, and it doesn't defend you against status effects. I think the healer support build is severely lacking, and some that we did get in the Division as well. The chem launcher I find is just still too awkward to use when trying to assist others, and again doesn't compete with the use or ease of use provided by the support station. That's just 2 observations. I've spoken about tank builds before, so you know my position on that. What I did want to add was the continued iteration of NPC aggressiveness towards players. The Bulwark shield is very good, but due to the constant flanking of NPCs, very often you are just walking backwards to avoid being shot from behind. I will touch more on this when I release my TU 9.1 review, because I don't think enough has been done yet with NPC aggressiveness. I'm still seeing it very much in the game right now. If the devs did make some real strides towards making tank builds viable, I would certainly be more inclined to use one. With that said, as a solo player, it's just not nearly as fun as running a DPS build and dropping NPCs quickly. Next up, and what tools, gear sets, talents, changes would you like to see, or do you need to try something else as all red everything? All red builds along with CC builds are the meta right now. All red being the most used, I imagine, and that's because of NPC damage to players, NPC tankiness, and because there's very few talents or attributes, if any, that actually help players against this. We currently have Glass Cannon, which is a highly used talent because of the significant increase in damage, and the same could be said for something like Vigilance, but there's no talent that really does the opposite quite so easily. Maybe bring more talents that assist the use of other skills in builds aside from the meta ones, or maybe a talent that could mitigate the amount of damage you take only if you're moving, for example, and that's just kind of off the top of my head. Talents like these would directly increase the viability of a tank build or a skill build. The second raid would likely be very status effect orientated, so more talents that could assist with mitigating status effects for solo and group play would be welcome. Overcharge, I think, is wasted due to the very limited ways to use it, either Acosta or efficient. Hybrid builds have become pretty redundant with Gear 2.0 deliberately by the devs, because before players were able to have high damage, high survivability builds, and that just wasn't really what they wanted, and I don't think the community wanted that either. That's not to say there's not builds in the game that are possible, because I've seen some good hybrid builds, but they are few and far between. The devs need to find a way to reintroduce hybrid builds without creating the problems we previously had seen before Gear 2.0. I think part of this could be achieved by the changes to Gila and Golan, as I've mentioned before. Moving on, and why do you use exotics and named items, and why not? Well, exotics are still very much collectibles for me rather than items I want to build around or use in a build. There are some exceptions, the Bullet King, Eagle Bear and others, but the vast majority, they just don't excite me. Most of them require a very specific situation to become powerful, and by that time, other weapons or gear pieces have already done the job. I think the main problem with exotics are their identity, and as a result they tend to underperform for the most part. Take the Lady Death, for example. It's weaker than its counterpart with a good talent because it wants you to play a certain way, but players want results, and variety, not just variety. This could be said for a lot of the exotics in the game. The Bullet King is unique, but its unique talent makes it really effective as well, without any sacrifice. It's still not as effective as, say, the MG5 with the right talent, but it's viable. Exotic weapons need more and more love, but the same cannot be said for exotic gear, which is in a much better place compared to weapons. Coyote Mask is my favourite exotic in the game, especially with the M1A meta, because they synergize so well and it stacks in a group. Acosta is the only way to really get overcharged, so it's kind of needed for that. Dynasty Holster, a holster I don't actually have yet, but it shows promise for some interesting combinations, but it's currently broken within PvP. The main incentive for exotics are their unique ways to play the game, but the biggest drawback stems from their lack of power compared to other gear or weapons in the same slot. The devs need to really focus on the underperformance. They will have data on which exotics are never used, so they just need to work on these. Change their talent if need be to better make sense and provide power otherwise. As I said at the start, they're just collectibles, and I don't think this is what players want, even if that's what the devs want. In respect of named items, even after the nerf to a few recently, they're still best in slot for the most kind of scenarios, which I'm okay with. There's very few situations where I don't use at least one named item within a build, and I don't mind that. I love my God Roll Fox Prayers or Contractor's Gloves. Would I like to see more named items that could compete for these spots? Sure. The more the merrier in my opinion. Having to decide between 3 or 5 different named items for one slot, depending on the content you are playing, would be better than just always sticking to one. Right now, I just use Fox's Prayers for my DPS build so it can become boring, knowing there's nothing I could swap it out with to either give me an advantage or just to offer something different but as powerful. More stuff is always good in my opinion. Next up, what skills do you like to use and why not? Alright, so the only skills I use are the Hive, Shield and Firefly for the most part. Now, remember I do play solo most of the time. The odd occasion I might throw on a pulse for group play, but these are my go-to. Revive, Hive and Shield or Firefly is a must when I play solo. I've tried using the Mortar in a skill build, which was actually quite effective, along with the Stinger Hive for group play. I've used the Booster Hive for group play as well, which was good. There are some skills I really never use. Seeker Mines, sticky bomb, shock trap, and turrets. Seeker mines frustrate me the most because I don't think it's that they're underpowered, but whenever I use them, they roll up to an NPC, wait for 3 seconds, at which point the NPCs roll out of the way, then they explode. Sometimes they don't even make it and they explode. More often than not, they simply just do not connect with the NPCs, and I just don't think that should happen. They're too inconsistent for me. I loved to use the sticky bomb when it first dropped with Warlords, but it was nostalgia. The damage is far too low, it's clunky, and the AoE is non-existent, which I don't like. The shock trap is probably my least used skill because there's just better skills which are far more effective at providing CC. I think the assault turret generally is good. I think the sniper turret as well, they appear to be in a much better place after TU9.1, but I still think the fire turret needs to go back to what it was in the Division. It still needs to have that 360 degree auto aim rather than this manual fire turret. It's just not cutting it at all. Aside from that, the drones seem to be in a much better place since the nerf to NPC damage against skills, which is really good. And I think this was a huge step forward, and I'm glad it was done. So it's, yeah, I could say well done to the devs for that with TU 9.1. Last and probably least for me, what specializations do you like to use and why not? Now, I mainly use the sharpshooter because I'm running the M1A all of the time. I love actually using the 50 cal, but I can deal twice the amount of damage in the same amount of time using my M1A. So most of the time I'm asking myself, what is the point of using it? One thing I really like about actually using the 50 cal is just how accurate it is when scoped in. It makes using the weapon actually very easy, which is good. I'd probably use a lot more specializations if there was more build diversity that required using another specialization. Simply put, if the devs did everything this topic is talking about, i.e. create more build diversity, using different specializations would become indirectly more likely as players find the right one for their new build. As long as build diversity is restricted to all red DPS or skill CC builds, and specializations use will be limited to only a few specializations rather than using all of them. That's it for today's video though, guys. Thanks very much for watching as usual. Tomorrow we'll be hopefully learn more about when the PTS for TU10 will be coming, and hopefully some of the things TU10 is looking to change and the gear that is coming. I'm specifically interested for me at the moment in what they're going to be doing for PvP. I don't think it'll be a whole lot, but I'm interested in it because I do miss playing the Division PvP, and it's been a very long time since I actually played it and enjoyed it. With that said, have a wonderful evening and epic out.